across Europe, there is not the same amount of maturity in terms of sustainability, and I think this is also related to the cost of living, to inflation rates, to many other things that might be impacting one market versus the other. As we have to offer one vision for full Europe, that was one of the things that it took us a bit of more time to arrive into a place in which we felt comfortable on the proposition that we were trying to offer.
You're listening to Retail Remix, your inside access to candid conversations with the people shaping retail's future. Here's your host, Alicia Esposito.
The world of sustainability is quickly evolving. If you're in the retail industry, you've likely heard a lot about resale or re-commerce and how that supports brands' broader sustainability efforts. However, there is one area of this world of sustainability that isn't quite as covered, largely because it is so complex. And that is this whole notion of sustainable product development and go-to-market strategy. So when I had the chance to sit down with Gabriella Herrera, Senior Brand Content Manager at Nestlé Purina Europe, to really dig into how she and her team went about developing the marketing strategy and messaging approach for Nestlé Purina ONE DualNature, I had to jump on the chance because she's coming at this project through the lens of a content person, a marketer, someone whose primary focus is to take product information and business information and make it seamless, digestible, and engaging for her audience. She and her team have a great partner in this process, Live and Breathe, so we wanted to make sure we had their side of the story too. That's why joining us on the episode is Andrew Hovells, Strategy Director. Now, he comes at this through a very different lens. Of course, he knows the project at hand extremely well, but he also has the broader experience of working with so many different brands, retailers, and businesses. And of course, at the top of this list for many clients is how do we talk about sustainability in a way that's intentional and meaningful for our consumers, but also accurate and true for the business. We have a very dynamic and multifaceted discussion on all things sustainability and what it means for this world of retail. So listen in, because you're not only going to get some great trend insights and industry insights, but you're going to get some great firsthand perspectives on how one business is tackling this issue firsthand. Gabby, Andrew, thanks so much for being on the show today. I know we have a lot to get into on a very dynamic and exciting topic, but first, let's start with introductions. Why don't you share a little bit about yourselves and your respective roles at Nestlé Purina and Live and Breathe? Gabby, why don't you go first?
Perfect. Thank you very much. And first of all, I'm super happy and excited to be here. So my name is Gabriella Herrera, and I grew up in Venezuela originally. I am from there. Now I live in Spain, and I work for Purina ONE in the central team in Europe for Nestlé Purina Europe. I started my career working for an advertisement agency called J. Walter Thompson. And since I joined the mass communication side of things, I would say, I knew I was quite linked to do brand strategy. So even though I started from the agency side, I wanted to convert into the dark side, I would say, at some point of my life. And I managed to do that once I arrived to Spain. So I have been living in Spain for 14 years already. I had a restaurant in between, but this is not for this podcast. I think it's for another session on which I can comment on that. But I worked for Aldi in Spain when they were quite recent in the market. So I had the opportunity to have a really nice example on how to establish a retailer here in Spain. And this was basically what also triggered all the curiosity related to the retailer and FMCG side of communication. And then I was hired by Purina to do the strategy for Europe. I started working on the specialist team, and now I have been working for the omnichannel team for 3 years. So really a pleasure to be here.
Wow, quite a journey. And I may take you up on that offer to have a deeper dive conversation about your restaurant ventures. Andrew, how about you? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks for having me. I'm Andrew. I'm a strategy director at Live and Breathe. Unlike Gabby, I started on the light side, but have stayed there. So I've been working in agencies for so long now. I have no hair left, but I still have enthusiasm. And I've spent all that time working through the line in various guises, from making TV ads to doing PR to doing shopper, doing everything. But I've spent most of my time working FMCG and retail and global and local clients. So my job is basically to partner with clients and make sure their communications is as effective as possible. I think that's become harder in recent years because of the proliferation of media, the fact that people can filter out brands these days. So we'll work harder than ever as a strategist to make sure that we influence consumer and shopper choice by really understanding what is driving it. Because these days, brands can't really hide from being relevant, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we'll get into some of the trends and what you're seeing, Andrew. But of course, how your team at Live and Breathe is supporting brands like Nestlé Purina in this process, especially as we consider the nuances of behaviors in different categories, which honestly is what I find so interesting about retail and consumer goods, is really getting into the psychology of it all. And I think it's only appropriate that we start there, because I do truly think that that's the foundation of strategy and all of the decisions and actions that brands can take. So pet food and pet care in particular, I kind of find that to be a very fascinating category. And we've done a few features on it recently on Retail Touchpoints. And what we've really found to be especially interesting and nuanced is the changing nature of how we think of our pets and the roles that they play in our homes and our lives. We've heard the term fur baby used more often than not lately. And it's especially prevalent among millennials and Gen Zers, it seems. We have some data to back that up. So Gabby, I'm curious, what notable changes have you seen among these pet parents and what they not just want from brands, but expect from brands in this day and age?
So, well, first of all, I share your passion. The first time I find out that I was going to be working for the pet care industry, I think it was one of the happiest days of my life. I'm a pet parent by myself, so I have a lovely dog here called Marvel. Also, it
Aw.
reflects my passion of comics, around comics. And I would say that one of the trends that we have seen more recently is everything around humanization of the pets. You were correctly saying people wants to be able to integrate their pets in everything that they are doing. So starting from traveling, to go to grocery, to go to restaurants, to take them to all different places. There is a pilot, for example, here in Spain, to even have them as visitors in the hospitals for people that is sick, to be able to integrate them and have them as part of the family members that are able to visit them, which is quite awesome because I think that demonstrates the place that they occupied in our heart. So definitely humanization is one of the trends that we have seen growing most strongly in the past years. Also, another one that we have been seeing is a consequence of the after pandemic period, which is all the anxiety around the fact that most of the people that were dedicating a lot of time to their pets during the pandemic were either invited to go back to the office or started to have a more social life on which probably they are not able to integrate their pet as much as they would like to. So everything around well-being, holistic well-being for pets, how to make sure that pets are comfortable in the houses where owners are not able to be there. It's really something that is a trend that is growing on and that we see even going into places that we were not expecting. Recently, I was seeing the Google Trends around pet care, and there is a huge trend on acupuncture therapy, on which people is taking their pets in order to do acupuncture to relieve certain type of pains that they might have when they become senior. So definitely pets are having a really important place on consumers' minds. This is something that I think it's going to get even higher in the upcoming years. I don't know, Andrew, if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, I think it's really an interesting time thinking about Gen Z and younger people. The whole pet parent thing is fascinating. There's loads of reasons behind it. Some of it is the fact that this audience, to a certain degree, are deferring having children because they're worried about the world and are almost using pets as a replacement, which is really, really interesting. But one thing which is quite useful is all parents worry about their children. They worry about the future. And it's fair to say that a parent of any kind of child at the moment is kind of worried about where the world is going. It makes it easier in some ways as a planner and strategist to figure out how to connect with pet parents because of all the insight we have on real life parents, because we are literally extrapolating parental fears for their children into now parental fears for their pets as well. And that's really interesting, thinking about sustainability and thinking about how gendered feel about the world at the moment, because they are kind of worried about where the world is going, because it is a complicated place right now, whether it's wars in Ukraine, whether it's cost of living, whether it is, of course, sustainability. They feel quite powerless. So what they're looking for is positive acts almost to actually affect the world around them when they don't feel able to in many ways. And that's got lots of implications for brands and lots of tensions in communications and lots of stuff at the moment. So it's really interesting space to be in, but also quite a complicated space as well.
Yeah, I think those are really great points. And it's interesting to see the connecting points between, Gabby, what you shared, as well as Andrew, like how that translates into thinking about the well-being and what that means for their pets, right? Because like I've been hearing this term holistic wellness quite a bit, like especially as we think about retail and retail environments. And I think that idea of being concerned about the state of the world and being able to minimize your environmental impact and what does that look like from a consumer standpoint. But then the connecting point is, of course, you love your pet. And Andrew, as you called out, some folks are just deciding to have pets and not have kids. And the way you care for them is to ensure that everything you buy for them is best quality and ensures a better quality of life. So again, it's just interesting to see those connecting points. And Andrew, I'm curious, like, how are you seeing your brand partners and other players respond to these consumer behaviors and expectations around sustainability? Because I feel like it's so layered and nuanced. Like, how do you encourage them to think strategically about how to respond? And this could be Nestlé Purina, it could be other clients. I'm just curious, like, how do you navigate those conversations? Because we've been hearing greenwashing quite a bit, and I'm sure that's top of mind.
Yeah, it's a space where it's weird, but things that seem to work at the moment is when brands and companies don't shy away from difficult conversations. They don't shy away from being honest, and they don't almost like shy away from telling the truth. Because years and years ago, even thinking about pet food, thinking about category discriminators, it would have been quality, it would have been taste, and a lot of it would have been cost. What's really interesting thinking about most categories now, that all of us, but especially the young target audience, because they are so values driven versus never quality or even functionality driven, that sustainability is actually becoming a category discriminator for people to actually cut through the complication of brands. Because it's also worth thinking about that it doesn't matter whether you talk about sustainability or you're talking about any category. There's too many brands making too much stuff. And so all consumers, and especially young people, are cutting through the clutter by looking for brands who align with their values and almost put their values before profit, or feel that's what they're trying to do. And there's all sorts of implications for big companies, because the big companies, to drive sales and profit, need to be seen to be using their powers for good, not just for driving and profit anymore. So there's a big tension there for big companies, because of course, adapting to the change within sustainability costs money. Adapting your systems and the way you make things and your communications costs money. It takes a lot of thinking, but it's actually going to be a shortcut to growth, because as sustainability becomes like a much bigger category discriminator, those who are ahead of the curve and ahead of the game are ultimately going to make more money, as long as they're prepared to think long term and not prepared to think short. But the challenge is that we've got a lot better as societies, especially young people, about smelling lies, about smelling greenwashing, about smelling the fact that maybe companies aren't as true as they used to be. So the more that companies find a way to be honest without getting caught out, is going to be a shortcut to success in here. And that's what we're finding works really well at the moment.
Great. A lot to unpack there. Gabby, any thoughts on what Andrew just shared, or any insights as far as how your understanding of consumer demands and behaviors have translated to the creation of Nestlé Purina ONE DualCare communication campaign, the key product differentiators, and why this was such a notable milestone for the brand? Again, just like knowing the brand history and brand relevance and in context of, pet care and pet health in conjunction with everything Andrew just shared, I mean, I'm curious, how all of this kind of culminated and came together for Nestlé Purina.
So I think one of the things that Andrew mentioned, which is clearly something that I have changed in the past few years, is that sustainability is not a commodity anymore. It's a responsibility that we do have as a business. This is something that translates to all the different aspects of the company internally. Even you can see it in the fact that we do have a whole department that is dedicated to making sure that we are driving our strategies towards a more sustainable way of doing our products. So putting sustainability at the core of the business is something that I think it took a bit of time for big companies to address because it required a lot of work, but now it's definitely there. There is no one conversation around innovation or around business deeds that you don't have that part of the team seated at the table. And this for me, it has been a really nice change of mindset that we can see and that will definitely accelerate the way that we are going to be creating products for Gen Z and also for all the different type of consumers that we have. Then when we think about consumers also, they are requesting us to have a role beyond only nutrition. So they want brands to be their companionship, in this case, to the full pet parenthood journey. So that also have created like a wide space for us to explore other ways and other services that we can offer to answer to that. In that wide space, we also thought about starting to integrate more the policies and those departments that were telling us how to make products more sustainable into a new relaunch. So Purina ONE DualNature existed already from 2018, and it was showing it to work quite nicely in terms of nutrition. So we said, what we don't take a step forward, and we explore how to assess the full supply chain in order to address a lower carbon footprint of this range. This requires a massive setup behind, and it also integrates some external partners to validate and make sure that every step that we are taking is trustable and is done in the right way. So it took us a bit of time to arrive there, but I think all those components, so having the internal mindset already established with the right type of assessment, of external assessment to make sure that we were making the right decisions, and also knowing that there was a wide space on which we could play more on the educational part of showing how to bring sustainability to the forefront. All those three aspects make us want to put also this in our innovation and renovation pipeline. So it's really one of the most beautiful projects I think I have worked on, quite complex, because I think in Europe there is not across Europe, there is not the same amount of maturity in terms of sustainability. And I think this is also related to the cost of living, to inflation rates, to many other things that might be impacting one market versus the other. As we have to offer one vision for full Europe, that was one of the things that it took us a bit of more time to arrive into a place in which we felt comfortable on the proposition that we were trying to offer. And then also the regulations, they are not the same across Europe. So it requires a lot of different conversations and a lot of different assessments with governments and regulatories that they have in the market to make sure that you are creating something that is bulletproof. Then I would say that the key of success of what we did is based on the fact that we have proof points, that we were transparent with our sustainable journey. We were not overpromising on what we were intending to do. We said that it was our first step, but we were the first ones as well inside of the organization to move into that direction. And we are also part of a bigger ambition that Nestlé has to become net zero by 2050. So all those things, they made the project to be also recognized by other categories inside of the business. And I think they helped us to have a solid proof also to show to bigger top management on the importance of putting this in the forefront of the agenda of the company. I don't know if that summarized quite well, but I think it has to be, there was the consumer on one side, but also there was the business also on the other side, and the fact that the business was ready to address the consumer need, which wasn't that clear from the beginning.
No, I think it's totally a valid direction to go in, Gabby. And I think it's something that almost gets overlooked as we talk about sustainability, especially through a media lens. I think there's a lot of excitement around topics like re-commerce and resale, which, is very consumer driven specifically, right? Like, how do you create those networks that encourage, consumers to engage with products long term and with brands long term? But I think in your case, in the case of Nestle Purina specifically, it just really shows how much work goes into actualizing these efforts across the organization. So specifically the points you brought up around varying levels of awareness and engagement with sustainability at the consumer level, but also varying regulations at a global scale, especially for a business of, Nestle and Nestle Purina's stature. There are a lot of moving pieces here in order for something like this to not just come to fruition, but also to be fully actualized, like as it kind of goes through that development process and goes through into marketing and communications. So I appreciate you kind of going down that path, because I think for our listeners, it's really important to understand all of those levers that play a role here. And, I do want to make sure we talk about that actual going to market stage of this, because, knowing the complexity that's happening inside of the business, or I guess I should say the orchestration required, I think that's more appropriate, probably all the parties at play. It's important to simplify that and make it consumer ready, like when it's time to communicate the Nestlé Purina ONE DualNature story, right? And even as we think about like the consumer benefits, it's like the quality of the product means you can take better care of your furry family members, but then there's also the long-term benefits of being more sustainable and environmentally responsible with your purchases and buying more sustainable products. But then, of course, there's the technical stuff too that goes into creating the product. So I guess the big question for you is how the brand goes about balancing all of these narrative elements and all of these levers that can go into storytelling for a product. And then even considering like how that scales across all channels, like was that a complicated process to establish and firm up? Like what are we exactly focusing on? How do we best communicate this story?
So I would not deny that it wasn't an easy process because of the level of technical language as well that you can get when you are talking about sustainability. But one thing that I would like to mention is that as part of the brand team, so I have the pleasure to work with the brand manager, which is the one that is more close to the product, the recipe, the type of kibbles that we are putting behind, the type of pack, the substract of the packaging that has to be taken into account in order to make the preposition strong. Then you have, I have also one member of the team that is the design to deliver, which is the one that is more focused on packaging. So it's helping us to translate all this narrative into the packaging in different languages, because we do classify our packaging per cluster. So he has to create a beautiful packaging with all the information that we want consumers to find out about ourselves when they're in front of the shelf, in 4 or 5 different languages per pack. He is also quite a magician. And then you have the comms brand content manager, which is myself, who needed to make sure that to create the right balance between the product story, because the awareness around DualNature wasn't that strong yet. So of course we couldn't leave aside the fact that what the product stands for and how does this contribute to the overall umbrella of Purina ONE of visible health for today and tomorrow. And then on the other side, to make sure that I was explaining in a clear way the benefit around the putting this first step into our sustainable journey with the 15.7 carbon reduction, 15.7% carbon reduction. So those two things were, for that, it was super important to have involved. We worked with the guys from Live and Brief to make sure that we were creating a strong messaging matrix that it was helping us to place the right message across all the different stages of the journey. So that was the way that we were trying to address that need of balancing out the message around the carbon reduction together with the message about the ranges and the RTBs that this product have. So of course we created a full funnel experience, but if you think about the mass media channels, on those ones, we were trying to capitalize the fact that we were the first range inside of Purina that was moving towards the direction of reducing its carbon footprint. And then the more you were getting closer to the shelf we were, of course, introducing those messages that were more close to the product. Because it's true that even though sustainability continues to be something that is going to be pushing the drivers for purchase, the nutritional aspect of the recipes continues to be the number one driver of purchase for consumers. So that was a bit the balance that we tried to handle. How can we help this range to achieve more mental availability in the consumer's mindset without losing the space to tell as well what is this recipe about and how this will impact their pet well-being.
Got it. Andrew, anything you want to add, like in terms of the collaborative process? I do want to make sure we talk about like what has been most resonant, but I don't know if there's anything you can add to what Gabby just shared.
Yeah, the process in this case was really interesting because what was really good was the fact that Nestlé were being really honest with themselves. And we talked at the start of this discussion about psychology, but also the willingness to embrace the true consumer and shopper psychology around sustainability. And a lot of that does come down to transparency and honesty, that the biggest barrier really for people to actually embrace sustainable behavior is the fact that it's unfamiliar and it's new, and they have to make a change within their own lives. And if there's a simple truth about human beings is we don't really like change very much. And it was interesting, therefore, that the whole thinking behind it was you use the power of the Purina ONE brand, which people are familiar with, and we actually embrace the fact that this is the beginning. So it's a change, but it's not a massive change, which means that it's more doable. Another point of it was this wasn't just about what the brand is doing. It was empowering the shopper, the consumer, the human being to do something as well. Because another challenge behind the psychology of sustainability is that lots of people don't do anything because they don't believe anything that they can do is going to make a difference when some of the challenges are so frightening and so big. So a lot of the thinking behind it was this is a little act which will make a big difference if enough of us do it. So this is collaborating with the shopper and the consumer and beginning collective action versus the fact that we're going to do it for you, or the fact that it's not going to make any difference if you do it. But then there's another point which is really interesting here as well, which is simply about, again, another psychological insight that people aren't perfect. And when it comes to sustainability, Gen Z is certainly not perfect as well. For example, they agree more than anyone else on the planet at the moment that sustainability is important. They are also engaged in fast fashion more than anyone else on the planet, which doesn't make sense, except for the fact that the human beings are not perfect. So for the brand to say, you can't change everything overnight, but at least you're doing something, and here's something you can do, was really powerful because it cut through the hyperbole of the world, let alone the category, and said, look, we're just being honest, let's all make a start. We as a brand, us as an organization, not perfect, but we are making the start and we are trying. And there's another psychological truth behind that as well, is we don't judge quality and people necessarily on the achievement. We judge them on the amount of effort that they put behind it. So celebrating the effort is actually more powerful and sells more sometimes than quality perceptions and ingredients. And it was just a really smart approach, which is paying dividends.
Awesome. So Gabby, to that end, I mean, can you share any insight into like what has been most resonant among consumers, like what has really connected with them the most from a messaging and communication standpoint?
In my view, and I have reflected a lot about it since we launched the campaign, and in my view, we have plenty of loyal consumers which have Purina in their hearts, which is an amazing place to be totally transparent. And they appreciate a lot the fact of being transparent with them and taking them through our journey and every step that we did in order to guarantee that we were arriving to that reduction. So the biggest win that I take from this campaign, beside the fact that we were the first brand that started to do this and that now we are being used as a flagship for other brands to start to embrace the same type of journey, it's about that moment and that collective consciousness that Andrew was referring about. That is all based on we are not there yet, but this is how we are trying. And this is all the efforts that we have been doing in order to arrive to this number. And this is all the people that we involve. And I think all of that, because these consumers, they research a lot and they are willing to take the extra mile in order to make sure that what you are saying is trustable. So when they get that answer, it's a really nice moment of encounter between the brand and the consumer. And this is one of the main wins that I have with this campaign. And this just fuels up everything that comes after this campaign, all the things that we still have in the pipeline and in our journey to continue to do this just fuels up anything else that we have to do in order to make sure that we are not talking the talk, but we are also walking the talk, and that we are making actions to contribute to that general message. So I think that's the direction that we are heading towards as well. What are the actions that we can take in order to make sure that everyone is educated around the importance of reducing the carbon emissions and impacting positively in terms of climate change and mitigating the risk? So this is the biggest learning that I take from it. Being transparent, not overpromise, and find your community, because when you find it, they are super loyal to you, and they will also help you to do it better.
Right. I really like that. And I think when you have that community, these consumers have a vested interest in the well-being and the direction of the brand. There's almost like a sense of ownership, if that makes sense, right? It's like, I love this brand, like I want it to succeed, and I know they're not perfect and they may mess up sometimes, but like how can we help them, the brand, and us collectively do better and be better? And I feel like we're already extracting or peeling back the layers on some really actionable takeaways for our listeners who may be kind of scratching their head saying like, oh, I'm not at the level of this team, or, our brand isn't at the level of a Nestlé Purina, right? So like, how do we do this? And Andrew, I'm curious about your thoughts, because I'm sure you have partners and clients of all shapes and sizes here. Like, how can brands ensure that they're speaking to consumers thoughtfully and intentionally about their sustainability efforts? Again, knowing that people are at varying stages in the journey, that there are going to be missteps and mistakes along the way. I mean, that's kind of just a reality, right? So is it just leaning into this humanity aspect and transparency that we're kind of organically already talking about here?
I think at a simple level, it's absolutely about transparency. It's fair to say as well, being a little bit broader, that great brands and great leaders manage to unite communities and different people behind one shared goal. And brands which are really succeeding are beginning to do that, where it's a shared direction of travel that everyone can become a part of. And going even deeper into the psychology, it's not just about sustainability now. It's about something which has come alight because of the pandemic and because of the cost of living. Because one big cultural shift at the moment is people are sick of companies and culture, and especially brands, pretending that life is perfect and pressuring them to be perfect. And they expect, if you think about the average piece of advertising or even the incredible piece of POS, it paints a world where everything is fine. And it's really powerful and really honest and really cuts through to actually say, you know what, things aren't fine and we're not perfect right now, but we're on a journey. Come with us. And you create that community because you are literally on this journey together. And people right now don't feel that they're perfect, and they almost want permission to just have a go and permission to be imperfect and to be contradictory. And leaning into that can be really, really powerful. Another thing I would say as well is for companies that are thinking, yeah, but this is something on the rise, this is something we'll think about in 5-10 years. That once upon a time when I was growing up, and I'm showing my age here, I used to get DVDs delivered by post and then send them back again. And Netflix was one of those companies.
Yeah.
And one of their main competitors were Blockbuster. And all that Netflix did is it realized, hang on a second, something's happening here. People are beginning to actually not necessarily want to have things posted. They want to watch it whenever they want to. And they went through a lot of pain to change their infrastructure and experiment and learn about how they could deliver content to people when they want it. And then eventually, hang on a second, people want lots of content here. We need to make our own. Blockbuster didn't, because they thought, you know what's going to be okay, we'll stick to our guns. And you know what happened? And because in culture, sustainability is one of these things, there is more fast-paced change than there has ever been. Companies can either hold on today as tight as they possibly can and survive for a bit, or they can embrace tomorrow and have long-term growth. Because if you actually look historically at the FTSE 100 in the UK or the NASDAQ, Most companies don't survive. The ones that survive and stay present and stay successful innovate ahead of the curve, and they're ahead of their customers, their shoppers, their consumers, and bring them along on the journey. And that is the most important thing, is if you act first, like Nestle is, and you're honest about where you're going, you'll bring people along, you're going to set yourself up for success. And because sustainability is one of the biggest things societally on the rise at the moment, it's not going to go away. People that act first will reap the rewards in the future. And for a business that needs to make more profit, that's great because it actually means more profit.
Great point. So as we think about not just, marketing innovation, but product innovation and business innovation, it's all about trying to be a few steps ahead, so to speak, knowing how quickly not just consumer behaviors and expectations are evolving, but how the market is evolving too. Again, I think we've kind of established how multi-layered this topic really is. So it seems like that really needs to be a part of the consideration set, regardless of whether it's the quote unquote hypey thing to do, right? It's not about the PR headlines. It's about what does this mean for our business to be competitive and really differentiate through the lens of sustainability.
I would say two other things because now by hearing Andrew, I also realize of two other aspects which are fundamental. Well, one I already tackled, which is the consumer, and try to involve them as earlier as you can in order to make sure that you are hearing them, their concerns, and you are also trying to tailor-made your campaign and the way that you are planning to build your educational tools around the things that they are questioning the most. And then the retailers. The retailers are also quite important part of the puzzle and on this relationship because they will also challenge you and they will tell you to do better because they want to list brands in their shelf that are answering to the consumer needs. So the early that you can involve with them and that you can tell them your plan and that you can have an honest conversation with them, the better, because they are also going to be the ones who are going to act as an enabler for your plans later on. As you were saying, it's not about the PR headline. It's about also how you integrate everyone as part of the effort to make sure that the retailers, the consumers, and the business are all talking the same language.
Absolutely.
That's great. Were you going to add something, Andrew?
Not at all. I just want to say that that's a really great point.
Yeah.
Also surround yourself with Andrew, which is a great
good people,
strategies,
right?
yes, that will challenge you as well. No, but also to a shout out to Live and Brief because to be fair, they handle it quite nicely because as I mentioned, it's not easy to translate technical language around carbon reduction into such a nice consumer facing claims and narrative.
I think it just speaks to the importance of bringing the right people in that can provide that gut check, so to speak, and, have that equal level of expertise, but also passion for the topic, because I could imagine as you get deeper into the weeds, it can feel a little daunting, as with anything in this industry. But, as we close out, I do want to make sure we just kind of summarize or sum things up, because as we've noted a few times over the course of this conversation, this is a space that is evolving quickly in many capacities through legislation, through the consumer lens, but of course through the business lens as well. So maybe we close out with both of you kind of sharing your insights on how you think sustainability will impact the future of retail and consumer goods, especially because, we are seeing this tug of war between what value means in the mind and the heart of consumer and what value use, plural, right? Balancing that, oh, I want to get the maximum value for my purchase, but I also want to buy from brands and purchase products that align with my values. I could imagine that's never going to fully shake out. But Gabby, how about we start with you? How do you think sustainability is going to impact this world that you're so immersed in?
So I definitely agree with you. I was reading an article in Work recently that was talking about that value that now you were also suggesting. And it's true that the sustainability value of a brand is going to start to be a metric that we will continue to search for. And if we think about how our brand health trackers are evolving, there is a new metric that Kantar and Ipsos have introduced, which is called the ESG. And it's a metric that basically tells you what is the sustainability perception of your brand by your consumers. So this already gives some indications about the type of meaning that sustainability is starting to have in the business mindset. And I think this is going to be a trend that is going to evolve into a point on which sustainability is going to be considered a hygiene factor for brands rather than something that is an add-on. That's my view, because the Gen Zs, as Andrew was saying, they are quite believers and advocates of creating a better planet, better society, better world. And this is something that we cannot leave aside, because it's basically the main goal that we all need to share. So definitely every time that we are thinking about doing some innovation moving forward or providing some service, and this is a message more for the people that is hearing, let's try to see how and in which level we can integrate sustainability to make it part of that process.
Andrew, any closing thoughts, again, because you have such a great cross-section of clients and brands that you work with? Any thoughts or predictions on how sustainability is going to impact this world of retail and CPG?
Yeah, I think sustainability for retail is going to become very Darwinian, and the retailers that don't adapt almost like ahead of the change will become obsolete, because the importance of sustainability is only going to grow and grow and grow. And at the moment, there's lots of pent-up problems and pent-up demand, which is going to explode at some point. I think that was my first point. The second point is that the future of retail is also the past of retail, and sustainability is a really complicated issue. And the reason that people actually started shopping from big-ticket retail in the first place was it made life easier and simplified it. And you didn't have to go to a billion different shops, you could go to one. And the companies that will succeed in the short and medium term are going to be the ones that make sustainable choices as simple for busy, stressed, time-poor people as possible. Because ultimately, sustainability is the new challenge, but human beings don't change. And it's always worth remembering that. The more you actually understand how people think and what people need, the more successful you will be.
Great way to close things out. Well, Gabby, Andrew, thank you again so much for taking the time out, for sharing a little bit of insight into your collaboration, but also your thoughts on this ever-changing area of the retail industry. To all of you listening, hope this sparked some new ideas, new questions, or new conversations to have, not just within your organization, but with your partners as well. Of course, we'd love to hear from you, your thoughts on this episode, and those questions that did bubble up as you were listening. Be sure to drop us a line on LinkedIn at Retail Touchpoints, or on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Our Touchpoints. We would love to hear from you. And of course, leave us your thoughts on today's episode or the show as a whole on your preferred podcast player. We're on Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, frankly, anywhere else. We're probably there too. And of course, while you're there, be sure to subscribe to the show. We have some incredible conversations planned, like this one with Gabby and Andrew, where we are digging into not just what's trending, but how our guests are really tackling the tech trends and issues that are driving industry change and disruption. For now, that's it from us. Thank you again so much for taking time out of your day to listen and to join us. We will see you next time. Take care, everyone. Thanks for listening to this episode of Retail Remix. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. You can find us on your favorite podcast player. Until next time, keep mixing it up.